Well, those of you who are here, thank you so much for coming today. Your time is so precious, we know, but it's so good to see you. We're so glad you're here. Miss you guys, miss seeing your faces and talking to you. So this is the October session of the AALC. This is writing meeting minutes with Tiffany Rauskulp. And there's 4 handouts that I hope you have with you, or you've printed out, or you've got it on another screen so that you can participate. And we will be recording today, which is awesome. And we'll post this to the staff development website under recorded workshops. And these workshops, they say forever. So if you're still here in 2080, you can still watch Tiffany present this workshop.
My immortality.
Yeah, no kidding. So anyway, we're just so glad that you could join us, and put some questions in the chat. Okay, no worries, Sydney. We'll take you for as long as we can keep you, okay? And now Tiffany Rauskulp, I don't know if, I don't think a lot of you met her because a lot of you are new. So Tiffany is an English professor here at the college, and she's the director of the SLIC Writing Across the College program, Salt Lake Community College. And so we are really fortunate to have her. She helps out the students, the staff, and the faculty with all of their writing needs, and she is the best. So I'm going to turn the time over to Tiffany. We're going to be here till like 2:15 or a little before, depending on the question and how much participation, okay?
Yeah.
Thanks
Right.
everybody for coming.
Okay, thank you, Deanne, for that lovely introduction. As always, you are the best, and it's just a love fest here. Okay, so what we're going to do today, I'm going to share my screen. Like Deanne said, I'm Tiffany. I'm the director of our Writing Across the College program, and we provide writing support to everybody at the college campus. I'm going to share my screen and open up our little PowerPoint. Okay, let me know if you cannot see that. I'm going to assume that you can. So this is a workshop that we've offered a few times. I've made some tweaks on it here and there. If you took this workshop last year, there are no changes to it, but hopefully maybe just coming back for a reminder is going to be beneficial to you. So this is what we're going to do today. So our goals are to understand what meeting minutes are and are not, the basics of meeting minutes. So I'm just going to go through like what's expected. We can talk about why meeting minutes can be challenging, both in taking them and producing them, and then break it down into the 3 stages of producing your meeting minutes. We're going to learn some strategies for them, and we are going to have a couple breakout sessions where we're going to practice meeting minutes for formal and informal meetings. Okay, so, and also just wanted to let you know, feel free to put something in the chat if you have a question or a comment. Some of you are expert meeting minute takers, and I am going to tell you I am not, but I know how to teach writing. And so, but I have taken meeting minutes, but it is not part of my regular job experience. So if as I'm moving along here, if there's anything you would like to add or anything you would like to clarify or explain, please jump in either through the chat or just unmute yourself and jump in. To me, jumping in shows me that you're engaged, and so please feel free to do that. Okay, so what are meeting minutes? All right, so there's some misconception about what meeting minutes are, particularly on the part of supervisors, or meeting chairs. So here's what they are. They are an official record of decisions and responsibilities made in meetings. They're a summary of important discussions and points, and they are a means of transparency in decision-making. So they comprise the record, and they help other people who were not at a meeting know what happened, but also they provide a record of decisions that we've made. But this is the big misconception. Meeting minutes are not transcripts of who said what. So, and I think that this is something that makes meeting minutes more and more challenging, because so often we interact with meeting chairs or supervisors who expect meeting minutes to account for everything that happened in a meeting. That is absolutely not what they are. So if your supervisor is asking you to do that, you can refer to this training and you can send them to me, and I will let them know that they are asking something unrealistic of you. Because that is just ridiculous. You're not a transcriber. You are taking meeting minutes. So let me go to the next slide. Okay, so here's basics of meeting minutes. So the name of the meeting, which is the what, the purpose of the meeting, which is the why. Why is the meeting happening? The date and time start of the meeting, who was there, what happened in terms of decisions made, who is responsible for assignments that have been assigned, and when is the next meeting. And this over here is just a sample of a Writing Across the College Advisory Committee meeting. I've got when it happened. I don't have the time start because for this advisory committee, it's not as important. And then I've just got the minutes. I've got bullets of the main decisions. Now, these particular minutes are pretty in-depth and may not necessarily be necessary for this particular meeting. But this was taken when we were starting the program up, and I was trying to document every single tiny little piece so that we could argue for the relevance of our program as we were going along. So let me pause there just for a second and see if anybody has anything they'd like to add or raise in response to these meeting minutes basics. It is so hard to say meeting minutes over and over and over again. Anybody have anything they want to add, ask, or clarify with your expertise? Okay, so we're going to go to the next slide. Okay, so why are meeting minutes a challenge? So number one, the main reason that they're a challenge is this misunderstanding of what meeting minutes are. And so that's one thing that we'll want to clarify here, that they are just those things that we went over on the slide, and that you might have different expectations, but that is what they are. And that falls in lines with the expectations of the meeting chair. So what the meeting chair is expecting and what is viable or what's realistic to produce. Also, when you're in the meeting, it can be hard to follow the discussion. I can tell you, I'm in an English department, and that is probably the world's worst place to take meeting minutes in, because we all have something to say and we want to say it for a very long time. But sometimes there might be some issues that you might not be familiar with, or some concepts or some arguments or some personalities that you might not be sure about. So it can be hard to follow the discussion at times. And also, some people feel somewhat unsure of their writing skills. There's nothing to be ashamed of with that. When you are hired into your position, you're not necessarily hired for your meeting minutes abilities. And so you may have some, insecurity or some vulnerability about your writing skills or the appropriate style of how to do them, especially if you have not done them before. And that's something that we'll address here. But let me pause here for a moment and let me see what are other challenges that you have experienced with doing meeting minutes. Sandra has had none. Sandra's the only one with her camera on, so she's the only one I'm getting. And I thank you for that, Sandra. It actually helps to get some feedback, some visual feedback. Let me ask you a question. How have taking meeting minutes changed with having meetings on Zoom? And feel free to unmute or feel free to put it in the chat. So sometimes people talk too fast. Caitlin said not understanding the discussion and what's important. Yep. Okay.
I have a comment. I don't know if you can hear me.
We can, Sydney.
Sometimes with like Zoom, what's really hard is sometimes people will go back and forth between the chat and audio. So that's been something that I found kind of difficult in order to figure out how to do. And sometimes I just do a massive copy paste into a different document, and then I can go back to it later. But one of the cool things is we do a lot of our big group meetings on Teams, and that file is always archived on that specific meeting that you have. So that's also helped me in that way. If you
that's good
that people are doing that. You can move from Zoom if you don't want it to export the entire thing to you. Just move your meeting if you have a few people. I think less than 10. Once you get more than 10, Zoom gets too hectic. But move it on to a Teams, and then you can just regularly go back to what's within that chat.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, I've noticed, I have found it frustrating just being in meetings that half of the meeting is taking place on the screen and half of it is taking place on the chat. And it's very difficult to kind of decide, where to look. And while there's accessibility issues, that we need to be able to have both of these venues, it should be something that that I think is agreed upon with your meeting chair of where decisions that you have to record where those are going to be noted. So are they going to be on the screen or are they going to be in the chat? And so just to make your life easier. And being able to record, I think, is very helpful. There's a program called Otter, and I'm going to put it in here. It's called Otter AI. And if you just look that up, that is actually an audio recording speech to text program that it will record a meeting, it'll record any kind of conversation, and it puts it into text for you. And it's incredibly accurate. And that can be something that's useful also to go back through and figure out who said what and when was a decision made or who seconded something as well. So go ahead and look up Otter AI when we're done with this. I found it very, very useful. Okay, next. So there's some stages of meeting minutes. So there's preparing, during, and after. And we'll go through preparing first. So preparing first, look at that agenda. So hopefully you've got an agenda. Look at that agenda, and you probably are the one who's been, like creating the agenda with your department chair. Hang on one second, I'm just looking at the chat. Sydney said it's nice to be able to record, especially if you can't attend the meeting, so another staff member doesn't have to try to take minutes off the cuff. Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. Yeah, the recording is, I love the ability to record Zoom. It's fantastic. So study that agenda and look at it to see if there's anything that you feel like you are not familiar with, and talk to the meeting chair and let them know that, if you need some background information in order to be able to follow the discussion and in order to know what are the important points of decision making or the important discussion points. So make sure you talk to the chair. And then before the meeting, prepare a parallel template to the agenda. So what I usually have when I've done this for the meetings that I've had, and I understand that this is a general practice of veteran excellent meeting minute takers. So you've got your agenda, but then you just duplicate it into another file that will be your minutes file. And that creates your headlines, that creates your outline for what you're going to be taking your minutes on. And then along with the agenda topics, just include all of these things that are these are the main points that are going to be in any type of a meeting minutes. So the name, the purpose, the date, the time, the attendance. It's easier to do checkoff. So what I recommend and what Jamie Warner, our ELWS administrative assistant, does is she just has the list right there for her, and she just checks them off as she sees us. And then when the next meeting is assigned, if you know when it is. So have that all set up. So when you've got that and you go into the meeting, during it, listen carefully and only take summative notes. And what that means is do not take notes on everything that everybody is saying. Don't worry about tracking that. If you're recording the meeting, you don't need to do that. And honestly, you shouldn't be doing it anyway, because that's not what minutes are. But just listen carefully and take the notes about sort of what's going on. Indicate who spoke or made motions for clarifying purposes. So if you're in a meeting where where decisions are being made, make a note of who made the motion or what the vote was, and just those things where it seems like decisions are being made or responsibilities are being assigned. Make sure you take those notes. This is try to sort the substance from the non-substance. And I think, clarify if I'm wrong, I think that this is something that comes from practice, that as you are working with these committees or these groups that you're taking the minutes during, you'll start to figure out what's important and what's not important. And so, but again, when everything seems important at the beginning, you'll probably take more notes than you need, but then you'll become more efficient over time. So carefully record the motions, decisions, and the vote counts. So those are the key points. So anything that is a decision or a motion and a vote count, that's that transparent record that you want to have. The second to last part, asking for clarification or restatement. So one thing I found in doing these workshops so far is that sometimes people are doing the minute taking, don't necessarily feel authorized to interrupt the meeting to ask for clarification. And I want to encourage you to be able to do that. In the English department, like I said, we are very chatty people and we think we have a lot of important stuff to say. One of our administrative assistant prior to Jamie was Diane Edmonds, and you may or may not know her. And she revolutionized for our department the presence of that administrative assistant in those meetings. And it was fantastic because what she would do if we were just going off and talking and she got confused, she would stop the meeting. She would say, wait a minute, slow down. I need to know what's going on here. Now what's happening? And she would make us stop. And it was fantastic because we knew that she was getting an accurate account of what we were doing. And Jamie has continued that. She will just stop entire meetings and say, wait, what's going on? And so I encourage you to do that. And I encourage you to talk with your meeting chair to let them know that you are going to do that. Because what it does is it recognizes your role, your very important role. You're not just a recorder. You're not just like a recording machine. You're a person who's engaging in this meeting, and you're a very important person in this meeting. And so take that place of that you need to know what's going on, and you can interrupt if necessary. And then also record if necessary, but I think we're all just recording all the time anyway now. So before I move on, anybody have any comments or thoughts on these strategies for during? Okay, y'all good. All right, and then after, go grab that parallel template. It's good to draft the minutes within 24 to 48 hours if possible. And this is just drafting them just because things will be fresh in your mind. And then go back and ask for clarification if you're unsure. Don't feel embarrassed about that. It's important that we get things accurate. Attach any meeting materials. So if there were any motions or any documents or any handouts, attach those, and then just keep all the notes until the minutes are approved in the next meeting. So the key point with after is trying to do it in a timely way, because you get one meeting and then you're probably going to another one, and then the meetings start to sort of all blend together. So just trying to do them fairly quickly after is very helpful. And it's easier to do this if you are realistic about what the minutes are, that they're not a restating of everything that happened, that they're just a summary of the decisions that were made and the responsibilities that were assigned. Okay. So I'm going to move here to the style of meeting minutes. And what I mean by this is kind of the writing strategies for doing meeting minutes. And so this is one of the handouts. Let me see if I can get to this handout. So this is one of the handouts here that you've received. It's the meeting minutes writing style tips. And these are all the different strategies that I'm going to talk about here. Okay. So first, not to beat a dead horse, but only motions, results, and decisions and very important points should be in your meeting minutes. It's a summary of overall positions and not individual. So let me show you an example of that. So these are the notes that, these are some sample notes that are being taken during the meeting minutes. Hang on, I've got to move your pictures because I can't see my screen. There we go. So these are some of the notes that, some sample notes. And these are just the initials of the people who were in there. And so I'm just kind of taking the notes so that I sort of understand what's going on. And this reveals the sort of the progress of the discussion, okay? But the minutes only say what happened in terms of the outcomes. The chair motioned for the approval of the new system to communicate grades to students. Members discussed applicability, security, FERPA training and funding. The motion failed by a vote of 3 to 5. The chair will follow up on funding availability at the next meeting. So instead of saying that IT says this and the chair said that's a problem, BT argues. So it's just kind of the outcomes of it. So it's keeping it general and not vague, but not specific to individuals. Okay. The next one is to use active voice. And this SVO stands for subject, verb, object. Oh, hang on one second. Susan asked, what happens if there are no concrete action items or even votes? That's a very good question. With that, probably what I would do, and I would like to get feedback from others on this, is I would record that the meeting took place, that these people were in attendance, and I might say these items were discussed and no votes or decisions were taken. Does that sound right for those of you who have done this longer than others? Not getting any responses. So not sure. Oh, is this, our meetings don't always result in action items? Yes, of course. That's what I would probably do. You still want to have a record of them. So just, we had this meeting, here's the main topics that were discussed, and no action items were taken. And so that would be fine. So that creates that sort of transparency. Okay, so with active voice, what this stands for is subject, verb, object. And what that means is that in the sentences that you produce, there's always going to be a subject here. So this is, for example, this says the chair made a motion. So that's a subject, verb, object. And this is different. Whoops, hang on. This is different from passive voice, where it would be a motion was made. And the reason for this is because for transparency purposes, for accuracy of records, we want to make sure that we know who did what, in case like we're ever audited, or, you know, we've got the whole accreditation visit going on right now. We want to have our documents in line with showing that that we know who did things, and it wasn't just this sort of opaque, this event happened. And also you want to keep meeting minutes in past tense. This is a question because while you're recording the notes, it's in present tense. So you might be recording the notes in present tense. So so-and-so says this, so-and-so says this. And so, but you want to move that into the past tense because the meeting is in the past. And let me just show you an example of this. So here's the passive voice. And this is what we don't want. So a motion was made to update the registration. So you want to have active. A committee member made a motion to update the registration. Ideally, you would probably have the committee member's name here, depending on the formality of the meeting. And then present tense, the committee agrees to amend the process. Past tense, the committee agreed. So just kind of trying to keep that in past tense is useful. All right, next is emotion plays no role in meeting minutes, even though your meetings might be very emotional. I mean, we have some meetings on our campus that get really emotional, but in the meeting minutes, that should not show up. And that's because meeting minutes, they are actually subject to, to public records requests. And so we don't want to, basically, we don't want to share our dirty laundry with external bodies. And so just make sure that the emotion is not in the minutes. So obviously, the chair angrily called for a vote should just be the chair called for a vote. And here is a way to do that. So because sometimes you want to communicate that this was a controversial issue, or this was, that not everybody quite agreed with it, just using a variety of language, variety of vocabulary will help. So too much emotion is the committee members then got into a heated argument about the issue. Like, we don't want to do that. But some neutral emotion that shows that it was not something that was necessarily, unanimously supported might be something like the committee energetically debated the issue. So trying to use language that doesn't have sort of negative connotations like argument, and using more sort of neutral connotations to show that type of experience. So let me pause there for a second, see if anybody has any feedback on what I've recommended here with this one. Okay, sounds like we're good. Okay, the last one is the formality of your minutes should equal the formality of the meeting. So what this means is, if you're in a meeting with the board of trustees and the president, and you're producing minutes for that, those minutes probably need to be pretty formal. If you are doing a meeting where there's no action items being taken, and it's basically a discussion, then they can be much less formal. And I'm going to show you a range of formality here, and I'll point out kind of the differences in them. So very informal is just naming the committee members, and that's assuming that everybody who might access these meetings, these meeting minutes in the future would know who these people are. So just Jenna and Hugo discussed several ways to distribute the new email templates and decided that Hugo would do it via the new course management system. So that's really informal, and it's almost just like writing a note. Mid-formal would change to like committee members agreed that Hugo Hendez will distribute the new email templates via the new course management system. So we've got first and last name. We're talking about the committee in and of itself. And it's more removed from being in the presence of that particular meeting. And then formal, we're going to change. We're not going to have any kind of first names in there. We're going to have titles and last names. And we're going to go through all of the motions. So Ms. Cunningham made a motion to distribute the new email templates via the new course management system. Mr. Hendez seconded the motion. The committee discussed the motion. The motion passed 5-3. Mr. Hendez will be responsible for implementing this change. And as you can tell, it's just a whole different level of formality and sort of it's less communicative in terms of, so there's a range of formality or what's known as register in writing and speaking. And this informal register is closer to how we would speak. And this formal, we probably wouldn't speak like this except in a formal circumstance. Okay. All right, so now we're going to do some practice. And this is where you're going to need, actually, let me pause before we go to practice. Let me stop sharing just for a second. Are there questions about any of these things or comments about any of these things before we move into practice? Does anybody want to share nightmare stories of taking meeting minutes? Okay, looks like we're good. Oh, go ahead, Deanne.
Yeah, I've had friends that are high-level admins where back in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was recorders. Everybody used recording devices then. And so lots of horrific things like the tape ran out, or because this was the little reel-to-reel cassette tape kind of things, or the sound wasn't, oh my gosh, name it. The sound wasn't high enough. They couldn't hear the soft-spoken deans back then, just nightmares. And now with this new software, oh my gosh, I think this is fantastic.
Yep,
I honestly, it's going to save lives,
It's much easier, much easier. Okay, so we'll go back. So I'm going to share my screen again. And what I want you to pull up is this next handout here. Oh, wait, sorry, 1 second. This word bank for meeting minutes, this is just a bunch of synonyms for said. So instead of saying said, here's a whole bunch of different ways that you can incorporate that somebody said something, but it also can provide some of that emotion that you wouldn't want to put in too much of. It also has some important meeting verbs. These are different types of things that happen in a meeting. And then transitions so that your meeting minutes don't just read like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here's some transitions for you as well. So that's what that handout is. Just a nice word bank to draw from. Okay, so we're going to do 2 types of practice. We're going to collapse notes of a formal meeting into meeting minutes, and we're going to take minutes of a casual meeting. And I'm going to put you into small breakout groups for this. We're going to do them together. Before I do that, go ahead and open your chat. And I'm going to put a link to a Google Doc because that is where you're going to share it. Hang on, let me grab this Google Doc and let me share this and let me copy this link. So if everybody could go grab that link and just go ahead and open that up. And what we're going to do first is we're going to look at some notes from a formal meeting, and I'm going to ask you as a group to collapse those into minutes. And then we'll take about 15 minutes for that. And then we're going to do taking minutes from a casual meeting. So let me show you how we're going to do this. So this handout here, practice collapsing notes into minutes. These are detailed notes from a meeting that I'm going to show you just a couple minutes of because it's the world's most boring meeting ever. And so I'm going to show you just so you can kind of get a sense of it. But here's the roll call. I've got all these detailed items here. And what I'm going to want you to do in your groups is I'm going to want you to just draft a section of the meeting minutes for this. And that draft will show up right here on this Google document. So I'll tell you what groups you're in a moment. Okay. I'm going to play this board meeting for a minute here, just in right now, and try not to fall asleep, but it's super boring. Okay, so, oh, wait a second. Hang on, I've got to share and share my sound as well. Hold on. Okay. All right, so get ready. We'll just watch this for like 2 minutes.
Community Television of Santa Cruz County Board of Directors meeting for April 24th, 2014.
Can you hear it?
I'd like to do a roll call. I'm here. Nathan Benjamin, not here. James Fisher, not here. Tess Fitzgerald, not here.
I'm going to jump
Jill
ahead
Hall.
out of the roll call.
Committee did not have a quorum, so we could leave approved minutes on the consent agenda. Okay, but the Finance Committee, 2 items need to be brought to the full board, and the Governance Committee has asked that the rules and procedures be brought to the full board. So I'm going to move 5, 6, and 7 to the regular agenda. I'll keep their numbers, and I'll just keep 4 the consent agenda. If that's acceptable with the rest of the board, then I'll ask for approval, a motion to approve the consent agenda,
So
which is
moved.
just the minutes. So Tom moves.
And I'll second that.
Okay. So any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none.
Okay, so hideously boring. All right. So what I would like you to do, I'm going to move you into breakout rooms, and I want you to pull up this document, this practice collapsing meeting minutes. Hang on, there's a couple things in the chat. Oh, that's okay, Sandra. So like I said, this is all of the notes. I want you to skim through these notes, and I want you to produce, just produce a brief set of minutes. And so just the ones where it just has the, just the motions and the approvals and decisions that were made. Okay. So before we do that, does anybody have any questions? So just assign one person. So when I move you into the breakout rooms, just assign one person. Hang on, where'd my breakout rooms go? Assign one person to do the drafting in that Google document. And let me recreate the rooms real quick. Okay, so I'm going to tell you who's in what rooms. So room 1, so group 1 is Carolyn, Janalee, Rebecca, and Rin. Room 2 is Caitlin, Rachel, and Susan. Room 3 is Deanne, Savannah, and Sydney. And room 4 is Ava, Brittany, and Samantha. Okay, so I'm going to open those rooms. Go ahead and move into them. We'll give you about 10, 15 minutes to produce those draft documents, and then we'll see you back here. Okay. You should be able to do perfect. All right, I got y'all back. Thank you for participating in this. Let me move you faces down here. Okay, so let me first say you are all such good students, because look at how nice and neatly you put your names up here in your groups. That is just amazing. Such good students. So let's take a look at these just for a minute. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this is because I wanted to show how there's no one exactly right way to do minutes, okay? Because all of these ways that these minutes have been done, they're all fine. And so there's not a right way or a wrong way. There's just these basic strategies that need to be taken. So do we have the motions and the consents and the decisions made? Are they recorded? And so as you can see, group 1 had very small, minimal minutes. And that's fine, because we have the elements of the most important things covered. Group 2 did the same thing. One thing that they did slightly differently is they showed who made motions and that the motions were passed unanimously. This item 5 loan, that might need to have a little bit more detail on it to explain what it was, because somebody may not know when they come back in to look at this. Group number 6 used a bulleting approach, and they have kind of a lot of detail going in here, including some numbers, which depending on how important it is, might be good to include. The one thing that group 3 did not do is assign like who did things. So this is almost all in the passive voice. So approved, recommendation, consent items. And so this doesn't show who was responsible. And so this one, while the details are fantastic, it might be good to include that active voice. Like this over here, it doesn't, in group 1, it doesn't say who it was, but it's always saying board of directors passed. So that might be good to do on this one. And group 4 reminds me of sort of a combination of 1 and 2, where it's got it's got the people who's moved the things. It explains, what's happened. And then board discussed the financial policy in regards to receiving personal email, but there was no particular decision made on it. And then there was recommendations and approvals. So all of these are fine. And they all use the strategies slightly differently, but they all do the job. And what they don't do is they don't go into all of the long conversations. So let me pause that just for a moment and see if anybody has anything they want to say, any input, any thoughts on that experience. Okay, so I'm going to take that silence. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was just going to ask. So my chair, at least of our PAC committee, which is the one I take the most notes on, specifically told me I was using too many names to describe who made what motion and who did what vote. So while I think it makes sense to have the names in there, if the chair specifically would rather everything be kind of vague, do I just go with what he says?
You got to do what your chair wants. Yeah. Yeah, okay, pretty much. Yeah. I mean, it's better. It's more, I mean, it's a better practice for public records to have the names. But yeah, if your chair is saying they don't want the names, you kind of got to do what they want. So yeah. Or if you want to, you could push back and say, well, I just learned this, but that's probably not a battle worth fighting.
Good point.
So, anybody else? Okay, so now we're going to do, so this was a formal meeting. Now what we're going to do, so we're going to do a practice on an informal meeting. And one thing that I like to do for informal meetings is you've got your agenda, but sometimes informal meetings, they range around, and there's not necessarily a clear, like there's not motions being made. There's not like I move this and I second this. It's just kind of discussions, and then decisions are made and responsibilities are assigned. And one thing that happens with these, and I'm sure you've experienced this, is that you come away from the meeting and you don't know who's responsible for what. Like you don't know who's been assigned to what. You don't know who is going to follow up on things. And so what I like to do with informal meetings is that you've got your agenda over here and just sort of in a table, and then you have notes on decisions and follow-ups. So, was a decision made, and is there any follow-up on it? And so with this one, we have enough time to watch the whole thing, but I don't think we will watch the whole thing because it also is not super interesting. But I think what we'll do is we're going to watch the first 3 minutes of it. I believe that some decisions are made and some assignments are fulfilled in this one. And then what we'll do, so we'll watch it, and then I'll put you back in those groups. And what I would like you to do is, if we go back to, hang on, I'm going to create a new row here. Let me create a new row, and I'll just have you do meeting minutes based on this. So you'll take notes in here. And obviously, if you don't have this printed out, it's not a problem. Just go ahead and just take notes somewhere else, and then go in and write those minutes. Okay, so let me pause and see if there's any questions. Okay, so I'm going to go to this. And we're going to watch like the first 3 minutes of this. So this person is Sarah. This person is Tina. And this person is Ellen. Okay. And I don't know if that's their names. I just gave them those names. Okay, so we'll go ahead and start.
For this morning's meeting, we've got a couple things on the agenda to discuss. First off, I'm gonna start with talking about our scheduling processes, because I know some of our staff are using their Outlook calendars and some of our staff are using Web Tracker. Some people use both, but that's creating double bookings and those double bookings can create a lot of confusion in the front reception area when those double bookings do occur. So I would like to talk about some processes around how maybe we can kind of streamline that process to make it a little more easier for the receptionist and make the appointments flow a little more fluidly. Eleanor, are you using Web Tracker or are you primarily using Outlook for yours?
I primarily use Web Tracker,
Okay.
but I try to keep Outlook just for my own personal appointments, but that doesn't mean there couldn't be some conflict there.
Right, because if you have an appointment or something like that, that might not be reflected in Tracker.
Exactly.
Okay, and what about yourself?
I use both, but I find that I'm in a really unique situation because I am the contact between the two different facilities.
Right.
So our only contact with the other facility is through Web Tracker.
Mhm.
However, all of our facilitators use Outlook. So I'm having to do Outlook because it's easier for them to pull up email as opposed to Web Tracker because depending on where they are, they might not have access. So I know like what happened this week with one of our classes who had a whole bunch of appointments. It was in Outlook, but it was not in Web Tracker, and then they were double booked into Web Tracker as
Okay.
well as doing a training session. So we had a major confusion.
Yeah.
there.
Okay.
So what's the
Um,
solution?
My thoughts are, I've already talked to IT and we cannot merge both. So there won't be any communication between a Web Tracker calendar and an Outlook calendar, so that's not gonna be an option for us.
Okay.
So my thoughts are either we suggest that people use one or the other and then the company is all on the same page so that there's no confusion.
Maybe
right.
we all just need to use Web Tracker.
Yeah, because our downtown location also has access to Web Tracker as well, and with Outlook, you'd have to grant access to everybody to be able to view different calendars, which I think could be very confusing.
Well, and Web Tracker being web-based as well,
Mhm.
if we are away, we can still check
Remotely
it that way.
from home,
So.
yeah. Okay, so are you guys okay with that?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so I'll head that one up and we'll have to send out some sort of communication to staff regarding that.
Yeah, if you want to put maybe like a little tutorial together on how to use the
Perfect.
full-on calendars
Yep.
in Web Tracker. The next thing I'm going to need to do is obviously change our policies
Mhm.
so that it reflects that we're no longer using Outlook for calendars
Right.
purposes, and make sure that the training package is associated with the
Okay.
policy. So if we can do that, and then we're going to have to get that out to the or to all employees
Yeah.
as soon as possible, so that we don't have a major issue like we had earlier this week.
Right, okay, perfect, so that will go with your policy updates, I will
Okay.
include that.
So in regards to the communication then, are we looking at doing a mass training? Because I know that this week we do have a staff training, an all staff training. Or do we
That's
want to do
great.
it via email?
Let's do both.
I think we could, yeah, I would
Not
agree with
everyone's always
you.
at those massive staff trainings.
Yeah,
And then we'll also have something written down we can refer to make sure we're doing it correctly, etc.
so we'll do both, we can send an email and we can also touch base, with our all staff meeting on Thursday with everybody,
Okay.
sound good?
Perfect.
Okay.
Well, we're
Okay, so I'm going to pause there. And then I'm going to move you back into your groups. And what I want you to do, hopefully you've taken some notes here on, scheduling processes. We didn't get to the office party or other. So it's just basically here. And so what I'd like you to do is I'm going to move you into the groups. I'm going to move this down a little. Oops, on the wrong thing. Sorry. These Zoom faces get in my way. Okay, so I'm going to move you back into the groups, and I'd like you in this row here, just write up how would you do this for minutes for this meeting. Okay, so it's very informal. How are you going to present that? So let me move you into the rooms, and I'm going to open them. Go ahead and jump in them, and we're only going to take 5 minutes for this. Okay, so hop on it and go ahead and write up your notes in here. Everybody should be back here in just a few seconds. Okay, it looks like everybody's back. And again, so here's an example of 4 different ways of doing minutes for for an informal meeting. They all look really good. And let me just point out a few things that I notice. So one thing I really like is having these sort of set up in decision and follow-up. So having subheadings for that, because that makes it really clear who's doing what. Over here in group 4, we've got, Sarah will do this, Tina will do this. We've got that here as well. We've got it over here as well. Tina will send out communication. The committee decided to use Web Tracker, so we've got that as well. One thing that I do like, where was it? Oh, where was it? Oh, right here with group 3. So it's very quick to be able to say that brought up scheduling issues and double bookings occurring. And that sort of provides the context for making that decision. And that's one of those things where you're trying to decide, okay, do I include this or don't I include it? Do I include just the outcome or do I include the outcome? It might be good just to include, here's the reason why they decided to make this change. And especially if you have anybody else looking at these meeting minutes and they might come back and look at it like, well, why did they change, why did they change the process? So I like that. But they're all really good. With this one right here, I'd want to make sure that you have who's doing it. This is a very common occurrence in meeting minutes. Is it something has to be done, but it's never assigned who has to be done. And honestly, it's not just meeting minutes, it's just meetings in general, that people make a decision that something's going to happen, but then it's never assigned to somebody. And so just making sure that it's assigned to somebody. And this is something that I want to encourage you to speak up in meetings when you're taking the minutes, to say like, oh, okay, wait a minute, before we go, this was decided, but who's doing it? And that will actually help your department or your committee that you're supporting and that you're doing this work for. That will actually help a lot, because we are so trained to just make decisions and then nobody takes responsibility for them. If you play that role of being like, hey, I've got these decisions made, but I don't know who's doing this or this or this, that will help tremendously actually in the efficiency and the success of your department. So any questions or any observations about how these played out?
I like how you summarize that, because then everyone can see who's been given assignments, and maybe someone has like 5 assignments and nobody else has any, so to make it fair, maybe, distribute those a little bit more even or something.
Yeah, definitely. And you don't have to approach it like, like you're being in charge. You can couch it in the terms of like, hey, I'm taking minutes. I just want to make sure I'm accurate. Now, who's doing this? And you can just kind of play that like inquisitive. Now, who's doing this? Not saying nobody's assigned, but just, that you're trying to make sure that you're representing the decisions as best as possible. Okay. So let's see, we've done that. There's some examples of those. Okay, so that's pretty much it. If you would like to follow up with any support for your department on meeting minutes or any other writing related issue, any kind of support I can provide to you, here's my contact information. That's my phone number. You can send to wac@slcc.edu, but you can also just send to my name on Outlook and I'll get it that way. If you would like the slides from this particular workshop, I can send those to Deanne and she can send them to you. I didn't provide them up front because I knew that would be online and you may not want to be taking notes like that, but I can send them to Deanne and she can send them around to you. And again, if you want me to, follow up with your department or larger area, I'd be happy to. Before we sign off, let me just see if there's any final questions or concerns or comments. I will send the slides to Deanne and she'll just send them out to everybody through the registration for this workshop.
Yeah, I'll take care of that with no problem. And also remember, this is recorded too, so it'll be put on our website too. And I'll let everybody know that was registered and weren't able to attend. And then one more thing, Tiffany has 2 more workshops coming up if you're interested. October 26th, creating your professional portfolio for staff. And she'll be presenting that with Victoria Harding. And also on the 28th, 2 days later, she'll be doing improving writing, which is grammar phobia. And so those are 2, they're listed in the staff development drop-down menu of the registration system. So I would recommend registering for those. They're both fantastic workshops. Okay, that's it.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Tiffany. It was awesome.
Thanks. Bye-bye.